Arizona Territory, 1880. The desert stretched endlessly beneath a pale afternoon sky, its red cliffs glowing beneath the setting sun. A dry wind moved across the open land, carrying dust through the mesquite bushes and rattling the wooden fences surrounding the ranch. At the edge of that lonely wilderness stood Kai's ranch. It wasn't the largest ranch in Arizona, nor was it the richest. There were no enormous stone buildings or dozens of expensive horses. Instead, there was a modest wooden ranch house, a weathered barn, several fenced pastures, a well, and a handful of smaller buildings used by the ranch workers. But the land was good. The horses were strong, the cattle were healthy, and Kai had worked for years to build everything with his own hands. Kai was 32 years old, tall and powerfully built, with bronze skin, long black hair tied back, and deep brown eyes that rarely revealed what he was thinking. He dressed simply in buckskin and dark leather, usually carrying a worn belt and a knife that had belonged to his father. People in nearby settlements respected him. Some feared him. Most simply didn't understand him. Kai rarely went into town unless he needed supplies. He didn't attend dances. He didn't drink in saloons. He didn't court women. There had once been a time when he had believed he might have a family. Then his younger brother had died during a violent dispute over cattle. After that day, Kai changed. He became quieter, more distant, more determined to depend on nobody. His aunt, however, refused to let him disappear completely into his loneliness. One evening, while they sat outside the ranch house, she finally said what she had been thinking for months. "You need a wife." Kai didn't even look at her. "I need cattle." His aunt smiled. "You have cattle. I need better fences. You repaired them. I need more workers. You have enough." Kai finally looked at her. "You're not going to stop, are you?" "No." She handed him a letter. "There is a young woman traveling west. Her name is Clara Whitmore." Kai frowned. "A mail-order bride? She isn't asking for wealth. What does she want?" "A place where she can start again." Kai looked toward the mountains. "I don't need someone who expects a grand house. She doesn't. I don't need someone who complains about ranch work. She won't. And I don't need someone who thinks she can change me." His aunt smiled. "Perhaps that's exactly what you need." Kai ignored the comment. But 3 weeks later, he found himself standing beside the dusty road, waiting for the stagecoach. When the coach finally appeared, he immediately noticed the lone passenger stepping down. Clara Whitmore wasn't what he expected. She wasn't dressed like a wealthy bride. She wore a faded cream-colored dress beneath a simple brown shawl. Her long chestnut brown hair was tied back beneath a bonnet, and her boots were covered in dust. She carried only one small wooden trunk. Kai watched as she lifted it herself. He stepped forward. "I'll take that." Clara looked at him. "You don't have to." "I know." He took the trunk anyway. She studied him for a moment. "You're Kai?" "Yes." "I'm Clara." "I know." She smiled slightly. "I suppose that saves us both some introductions." Kai almost smiled. Almost. They walked toward the ranch. For the first few minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Clara asked, "How far is the house?" "Not far." "How many workers?" 6. "Animals?" 30 horses, 70 cattle, some sheep." Clara nodded thoughtfully. Kai glanced at her. "You aren't frightened?" "Should I be?" "Most people are when they first see this place." Clara looked across the open desert. "I've seen worse." Kai didn't ask what she meant. He would learn later that Clara had spent the last 2 years caring for her dying father. After his death, relatives had divided everything among themselves and left her with almost nothing. The ranch wasn't frightening to her. It was an opportunity. When they reached the house, Clara stopped at the doorway. She looked around. The house was clean enough, but it was plainly furnished. The kitchen contained a small stove, a wooden table, several shelves, and very few supplies. Kai noticed her expression. "If it's not what you expected," he said. "It is," she replied. He looked surprised. "You're sure?" he asked. Clara nodded. "I wasn't looking for luxury." That evening, Kai showed her the room she would use. "I'll sleep in the other room," he said. Clara looked at him. "I didn't expect anything else." Kai nodded. Their marriage arrangement would begin slowly. No pressure, no demands. Just two strangers trying to understand what their future might become. The next morning, Kai woke before sunrise. When he stepped outside, he expected to see Clara still sleeping. Instead, he found her standing beside the barn. She had already begun inspecting the property. "You're awake early," he said. "So are you," she replied. "I work here," he said. "So do I now," she responded. Kai raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to work." Clara smiled. "I know." She looked toward the broken fence. "But somebody should fix that." Kai stared at the fence, then at her. "You've been here one day, and the fence has been broken longer than that." For the first time in years, Kai laughed. It was brief. Over the next several days, Clara quietly began changing small things. She reorganized the kitchen. She cleaned the pantry. She repaired torn curtains. She marked the food supplies. She noticed which horses needed better care. She even discovered that several bags of grain had been damaged by moisture. Kai watched everything. He didn't understand why the changes affected him so much. The ranch had always been functional, but it had never felt warm. Until Clara arrived. Then came her first dinner. Kai returned from the eastern pasture exhausted. He expected the usual meal: beans, dried meat, and coffee. Instead, he entered the house and stopped. The table had been covered with a clean cloth. A lantern burned in the center. Fresh bread sat beside a bowl of roasted vegetables. There was a thick stew filled with beef, onions, potatoes, and herbs. For dessert, Clara had prepared honeyed apples. Kai stared at the table. "What happened?" Clara looked up from the stove. "I cooked." "For how many people?" "For two." Kai sat slowly. He tasted the stew. His expression changed. Clara noticed. "Is it bad?" "No." He took another bite. "It is very good." She smiled. "You sound surprised." "I am." "Why?" Kai looked around the kitchen. "Because nobody has cooked like this here." Clara placed bread on his plate. "Maybe that's because nobody was trying." Kai looked at her. She continued. "You have good land. You have animals. You have water. You have workers." She pointed toward the window. "But everything is scattered." Kai frowned. "What are you suggesting?" Clara sat across from him. "I'm suggesting this ranch could be more." "How?" "Start small." She explained her ideas. They could sell butter, fresh cheese, eggs, bread, dried fruit. They could improve the horse operation. They could offer travelers food when they passed the property. Kai listened silently. "You've thought about this?" "Yes." "When?" "Since yesterday." Kai almost laughed again. But instead, he looked toward the table. For the first time, he realized that Clara hadn't simply cooked dinner. She had looked at everything he possessed and seen possibilities where he had only seen routine. Over the following weeks, Kai allowed her to try. The results surprised him. The ranch began earning additional money. Travelers started stopping by. Workers became more organized. The kitchen became the center of the house. And Kai began spending more time there. He would return from the fields and ask Clara what she had discovered. She would tell him about a new customer, a better way to store grain, a nearby family interested in buying cheese. Slowly, conversations replaced silence. One evening, Kai stood outside, watching the sunset. Clara joined him. "You're smiling," she said. Kai looked at her. "Am I?" "Yes." He looked toward the horizon. I don't remember the last time this place felt peaceful. Maybe peace was here all along. Kai looked at her. Maybe. Neither of them knew that their peaceful days were numbered. Several miles away, wealthy rancher Silas Mercer had been watching Kai's property. Mercer wanted the land, especially the water rights. He had already offered Kai money twice. Kai had refused. Now Mercer had discovered something new. Kai cared about Clara, and that meant the quiet Apache rancher finally had something to lose. One evening, Kai returned from checking the eastern fence. His expression was different. Clara noticed immediately. What happened? Kai looked toward the darkness beyond the ranch. Someone has been watching us. Clara's smile disappeared. Who? I don't know yet. He looked at the ranch house, then at the barn, then back toward the desert. But one thing was certain. The simple life Kai had expected when Clara arrived was already gone, and the woman he had thought would merely become his wife had unknowingly begun transforming his entire world. The changes Clara Whitmore had brought to Kai's ranch were impossible to ignore. Only a few months earlier, the property had been a quiet, lonely place where men worked from sunrise until sunset and then disappeared into their own rooms. Meals were quick. Conversations were rare. Nobody stayed around the table longer than necessary. Now, there was laughter. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread almost every evening. Workers began coming inside after work, instead of eating separately near the barn. Travelers stopped by to purchase cheese, butter, eggs, and bread. Families from neighboring properties occasionally visited. Kai had never planned for any of it. He had simply wanted a quiet wife who would accept the harsh life of the Arizona Territory. Instead, Clara had begun turning his ranch into something he didn't know he had been missing, a home. But with every improvement came a new problem. Silas Mercer noticed the changes. Mercer was one of the wealthiest ranchers in the region. He owned hundreds of cattle, several thousand acres of land, and enough influence in town to make ordinary settlers nervous. For years, he had wanted Kai's property. The ranch sat beside an important water source, and the land connected two of Mercer's larger grazing areas. Kai had refused every offer. Mercer had once offered him nearly twice the land's value. Kai had simply said no. Now Mercer watched travelers stop at Kai's ranch. He watched wagons leave carrying fresh goods. He heard that people were beginning to speak well of the Apache rancher. That made him angry. One afternoon, Kai returned from town with a troubled expression. Clara was sorting jars in the kitchen. "You look tired." Mercer was there. Clara looked up. What did he want? The same thing he always wants. The ranch? Kai nodded. He offered more money. And you refused? Yes. Clara smiled faintly. Then why do you look worried? Kai placed his hat on the table. Because Mercer isn't the kind of man who hears no twice. Clara's expression became serious. What will he do? I don't know. Kai looked toward the window. But I know he'll try something. And he was right. Within days, strange things began happening. A section of fence on the eastern side was cut. 2 cattle disappeared. Someone fired a shot near the northern pasture late one evening. One of the ranch workers discovered unfamiliar horse tracks near the property. Kai responded by increasing security. He ordered men to patrol the ranch after dark. He inspected every fence. He slept with his rifle beside his bed. Clara noticed the change. You're turning this place into a fortress. Kai didn't look at her. I am protecting it. From whom? You know from whom. She stepped closer. You can't spend every night expecting an attack. I can if it keeps you safe. Clara paused. The words affected her more than she expected. Kai seemed to realize what he had said. He looked away. Clara smiled gently. You care about this place. Kai nodded. I do. No, she shook her head. You care about the people in it. Kai didn't answer. That evening, Clara made a decision. She wanted to have a large dinner. Kai thought she was joking when she first told him. A dinner? Yes. For whom? Everyone. Kai stared at her. There are nearly 20 people working here if you count the families. Then we'll need a bigger table. We don't have enough food. Clara smiled. We do. Clara. Kai. He sighed. You've already changed half the ranch. Only half? He couldn't help smiling. The next morning, Clara began preparing. She gathered vegetables from the garden. She asked the ranch workers to bring fresh eggs. She used some of the beef they had preserved. She baked bread. She prepared potatoes, beans, roasted vegetables, stew, and honey cakes. By sunset, the entire ranch smelled different. Workers came in from the fields. Children arrived with their parents. Even 2 elderly neighbors who rarely visited came to the house. Kai stood outside the dining room, watching everyone gather. He looked uncomfortable. Clara noticed. What? She asked. I've never done this, he said. That's why we're doing it, Clara replied. What if nobody talks? He asked. Clara smiled. Then I'll talk. She was right. At first, everyone was quiet. People weren't accustomed to sitting at the same table as Kai. He was their employer, their rancher, a man they respected but rarely approached. Then Clara placed a plate in front of one of the children. The little girl smiled. Thank you, Mrs. Kai. Clara laughed. Kai nearly choked on his coffee. The child giggled. Soon everyone was laughing. One worker told a story about losing his hat during a storm. Another began talking about a horse that refused to obey anyone except his youngest son. Someone made a joke about Kai's terrible cooking. Kai stared at the man. You want to repeat that? Everyone laughed, even Kai. Clara watched him carefully. The hard expression that usually covered his face was gone. For the first time, she saw the man underneath it. Not the rancher, not the warrior, not the man who had survived loss. Just Kai. A lonely man who had forgotten how good it felt to belong somewhere. After dinner, people stayed outside. The children played near the barn. Workers talked beneath the stars. Someone brought out a guitar. Clara stood beside Kai. You were right, he said. About what? This, he looked around. It feels different. Clara smiled, because people feel welcome. Kai looked at her. You did that. No, she shook her head. You allowed it. That night changed the ranch. The dinner became a weekly tradition. Every Saturday, everyone gathered together. Clara taught the workers' wives how to make cheese and preserve vegetables. Kai expanded the livestock operation. Soon the ranch began making more money than it had in years. But Mercer became more dangerous. One morning, Clara returned from town carrying supplies. She found Kai examining a document. What is it? He handed it to her. Mercer is challenging my water rights. Clara read the paper carefully. If he wins, we lose access to the main water source. Clara's face tightened. Then we need to prove he is wrong. Kai looked at her. I've already spoken with the county office. And? They say the records are unclear. Clara stared at the document. Then I'll find the records. Kai frowned. You? Yes. You don't know what you're looking for. Clara smiled. I know how to read. The next morning, she traveled into town. For hours she searched through old property documents. Most were useless. Then, buried inside an old land registry, she discovered something. A water agreement signed decades earlier. It clearly stated that Kai's family had legal rights to the water. Clara returned to the ranch with the document. Kai read it twice. You found this? Yes. He looked at her with genuine admiration. You may have just saved the ranch. Clara smiled. We're not finished yet. She was right. That night, a strange smell woke Kai. Smoke. He rushed outside. The barn was burning. Fire! Everyone ran toward the building. Flames climbed the wooden walls. Horses screamed inside. Kai ordered the workers to form a bucket line. Then he saw Clara running toward the stable. Clara! She ignored him. She had heard the horses. She entered the smoke-filled building. Kai followed. Inside, the air was thick and burning. Clara reached the first horse and pulled the frightened animal toward the exit. Kai helped her. They freed another, then another. A beam cracked overhead. "Clara, get out!" "One more." She refused to leave. Together they reached the final horse. Kai grabbed the animal's reins while Clara pushed from behind. They escaped just as part of the roof collapsed. Outside, Kai grabbed Clara by the shoulders. "What were you thinking? The horses. You could have died. So could they." Kai stared at her. His anger disappeared. He pulled her against him. Clara froze. For several seconds, neither spoke. Kai finally whispered, "You frighten me." Clara looked up. "Why?" "Because I care what happens to you." Her eyes softened. "You don't have to be afraid of caring." Kai looked away, but Clara already understood. That night, sitting outside the damaged barn, Kai finally told her about his brother. He explained how he had watched him die years earlier, how guilt had followed him ever since. "How could I protect everyone if I couldn't protect him?" Clara took his hand. "You were only one man." Kai shook his head. "I should have done more. You survived." He looked at her, and now, his hand. "Now you don't have to survive alone." Kai stared at her. For the first time, he believed it. But neither of them knew that Mercer had one final move planned. The fire had not been an accident, and Mercer wasn't finished trying to take the ranch. The next confrontation would decide whether Kai lost everything or finally learned that protecting his home meant more than simply holding a rifle. It meant standing beside the people who had become his family. The morning after the barn fire arrived quietly, too quietly. A thin layer of smoke still hung over the ranch, drifting across the pasture where frightened horses moved nervously behind the fences. The barn had survived, but part of its roof was gone. Several stalls were damaged, and the smell of burned wood filled the air. Kai stood alone outside the ruined section. He stared at the blackened beams. His jaw tightened. Someone had done this deliberately. He knew it. And deep inside, he knew who was responsible. Silas Mercer. Kai had spent years avoiding unnecessary conflict. He had refused to answer threats with violence because he knew exactly where revenge could lead. But now Mercer had attacked his home. Worse, he had endangered Clara. Kai's hands curled into fists. Behind him, Clara approached quietly. "You haven't slept." Kai didn't turn. "Neither have you." "I was checking on the horses." "They're alive. So are you." Kai finally looked at her. She had a small bandage around one arm from the night before. Seeing it made something inside him twist. "You shouldn't have gone into that barn." Clara sighed. "You already told me." "I mean it. So do I." Kai stared at her. Clara stepped closer. "You cannot spend the rest of your life blaming yourself for everything that happens." Kai looked away. "I could have lost you. But you didn't. That isn't the point." "It is." She placed her hand against his chest. "You can't protect me by shutting me out." Kai looked down at her hand. He wanted to answer. But before he could, one of the ranch workers came running from the eastern pasture. "Kai!" Kai immediately turned. "What?" "There are riders coming." "How many?" The man swallowed. "About 12. Kai's expression changed. "Mercer?" "We think so." Kai immediately reached for his rifle. The peaceful morning vanished. He ordered the workers to bring their families into the ranch house. The horses were moved into the rear pasture. Men positioned themselves around the property. Clara stood near the porch. Kai approached her. "You stay inside." She shook her head. "No, Clara. You said that yesterday, and you almost died. I survived. This is different." She looked directly into his eyes. "No, Kai. It isn't." He frowned. She continued. Those people coming here aren't only attacking you. She pointed toward the ranch house. They are threatening everyone who lives here. Kai looked around. The ranch workers were gathering. Families were frightened. Children were being moved inside. The ranch that Clara had transformed from a lonely property into a community was now standing together. Kai finally understood something. For years, he had believed the ranch was his responsibility alone. Now there were people who wanted to stand beside him. He nodded. Stay close. Clara smiled. I plan to. The riders appeared over the ridge. Dust rose behind them. At the center was Silas Mercer. He wore a dark coat and a black hat. He rode slowly toward the ranch, as though he already owned it. Kai stepped forward. Mercer stopped several yards away. You have until sunset. Kai stared at him. For what? To leave. This is my land. Mercer laughed. Not anymore. He pulled a document from his coat. The county will recognize my claim. Kai didn't move. You're lying. Mercer smiled. Maybe. Then Clara stepped forward. No. Everyone turned toward her. She held a folded document in her hand. Mercer's smile disappeared. Clara walked toward him. You should read this. Mercer took the paper. His face changed as he read. It was the original water agreement. Proved that Kai's family had legal rights to the water source. Mercer looked at Clara. Where did you get this? The county archives. You have no idea what you're doing. Clara smiled. I knew enough to find the truth. Mercer crumpled the paper. Kai stepped forward. Give it back. Mercer threw it onto the ground. Then he looked at his men. Take the property. The next few seconds were chaos. One of Mercer's men reached for his gun. A shot rang across the ranch. Everyone scattered. Kai moved faster than anyone. He knocked the gun from the man's hand and forced him to the ground. Another attacker rushed toward the barn. 2 ranch workers stopped him. The sheriff's deputies suddenly appeared from the road. Drop your weapons. Mercer turned. His face went pale. Clara had secretly sent a message to the sheriff before the confrontation. The sheriff and his deputies surrounded Mercer's men. Within minutes, the attackers were disarmed. Mercer stood alone. He looked at Kai. This isn't over. Kai slowly approached. For one terrible moment, revenge filled his mind. He remembered his brother. He remembered the fire. He remembered Clara inside the burning barn. Mercer had nearly taken everything from him. Kai's rifle was in his hand. He could end it. He could make Mercer pay. Mercer seemed to realize what Kai was considering. Go ahead, he whispered. Kai raised the rifle. Clara watched him from behind. Kai's finger rested near the trigger. Then, he remembered something she had told him. You don't have to survive alone. He lowered the weapon. No. Mercer stared at him. You won't kill me? Kai shook his head. My brother died because men believed violence solved everything. He looked toward the sheriff. I won't become one of them. The sheriff arrested Mercer. As the riders were taken away, the ranch slowly became quiet again. Kai stood watching until they disappeared down the road. Clara came beside him. You made the right choice. Kai looked at her. I wanted to kill him. I know. I don't know why I couldn't. Clara smiled. Because you finally have something more important than revenge. Kai looked around. The ranch workers were helping repair the fences. The children were carrying pieces of wood. Someone was already repairing the barn. Everyone was working together. Kai turned toward Clara. You did this. She shook her head. We did. That evening Clara prepared dinner. Not an ordinary dinner, a celebration. The entire ranch gathered around the long wooden table. There was roasted beef, fresh bread, vegetables, beans, potatoes, honey cakes, and apple pie. The same kind of meal Clara had prepared on her first night. But this time, Kai understood its meaning. He looked around the table. The workers were laughing, children were playing, neighbors were talking, The ranch felt alive. Kai reached for Clara's hand beneath the table. She looked at him. "When you arrive, I thought you were simply going to become my wife. And now?" Kai looked around. "You became the heart of this place." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You gave me a home." Kai shook his head. "You gave me one." He paused. "Before you came, I had land." He looked around the table. "Now, I have a family." Clara squeezed his hand. "You had it in you all along." Kai smiled. "But I needed someone to show me." After that day, the ranch continued to grow. Clara expanded the kitchen operation. The ranch began selling fresh cheese, butter, bread, eggs, and preserved foods to travelers and nearby towns. Kai expanded the horse operation. The workers received better wages. Families were given small homes near the ranch. Every Saturday evening, the long dinner table returned. Nobody was turned away. Travelers could eat, workers could bring their families, children could laugh without being told to stay quiet. The ranch became known throughout the territory. People didn't come only to buy horses or cattle. They came because they knew there would always be a place at Kai and Clara's table. Years later, a traveler once asked Kai how he had transformed a struggling ranch into one of the most respected properties in the territory. Kai laughed. "I didn't." The traveler looked confused. "My wife did." Clara, standing nearby, shook her head. "Kai," he smiled, "you're the one who changed everything." Kai walked over and took her hand. "You cooked one dinner." Clara laughed. "One dinner?" He nodded. "And somehow, that dinner changed my entire life." The traveler smiled. "What was so special about it?" Kai looked at Clara. "It wasn't the food." He paused. "It was the feeling." Clara looked at the long table where children and workers were laughing together. Kai continued. "She taught me that a ranch isn't made valuable by its land." He looked at Clara. "It's made valuable by the people who call it home." And that became the story people remembered. The Apache rancher who expected nothing more than a simple bride had unknowingly welcomed the woman who would transform his lonely property into a home. Her first dinner changed the kitchen. Her kindness changed the workers. Her courage changed Kai. And together, they changed the entire ranch. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes it walks through the front door, carrying one small wooden trunk. And sometimes all it takes is one simple dinner to remind a lonely heart that it was never meant to live alone.